Tonight I'm going to read a section of a very ancient story from Ireland about Finn and the Fianna. And this story is called the Battle of Fiantraigh, or the Battle of the White Strand. That took place off the coast of Kerry, a place that today is known as Ventry, which is from the Irish Fiantraigh. There's several things that are very interesting to me about the story, which I've read in detail a few times lately, and been kind of studying it and trying to make some sense of it. Although the Fianna are supposed to come much later than the stories of, say, the Tuatha Dé Danann, and you will see from the section that I read that they still have the Tuatha Dé Danann still feature largely in it, but I suppose descendants of the original gods. One of the things that's interesting about the Battle of Fiantraigh is it's not incorporated into the Liber Gabála, the Book of Invasions, which describes various waves of invaders and influxes of mythical and pseudo-historical peoples, the likes of the Partholonians and the Nemedians and the Tuatha Dé Danann and the Firbolg and the Milesians, etc., etc. But this isn't included as part of that, but yet it is an invasion myth of sorts, because the basic premise of the story is that Daire Donn, who's described as the High King of the Great World, has decided to come and conquer Ireland and to put it under tribute. Now, he doesn't just arrive with his own army, he arrives with a whole series of leaders and kings of various countries and regions. And that's described thus. The King of Greece was with them, and the King of France, and the King of the Eastern World, and Luman of the Broad Arms, King of the Saxons, and Fiacha of the Long Hair, King of the Garin, and Tor the son of Brogan, King of the Great Plain, and Schligach, son of the King of the Men of Kepta, and Comor of the Crooked Sword, I love these descriptions, King of the Men of the Dog Heads, and Cachin, King of the Men of the Cat Heads, and Cashel of the Feathers, King of Lachlan, and Madon of the Bent Neck, son of the King of the Marshes, and 3 kings from the rising of the sun in the east, and Ogermach, daughter of the King of Greece, the best woman warrior that ever came into the world, and a great many other kings and lords. So it's clear that basically half the world's armies have moored themselves off the coast of southwestern Ireland, and the Fianna are going to have to defend Ireland against this absolute onslaught. What ensues is a sort of a series of skirmishes and battles, sometimes man-to-man combat or man-to-woman combat, involving a leader of the Fianna against one of the kings of the different countries, etc., etc. Sometimes the Fianna get the upper hand, sometimes the other side wins. In some cases they fall together and die together. It's very interesting. One of the fascinating things for me that piques my interest is the fact that before the Fianna are even aware that this giant army has amassed itself off the coast, the Tuatha Dé Danann are enlisted to take part in the fight, and they're actually the first to fight before the Fianna are even aware of the situation. So Con Crither is the one who happens to be guarding the White Strand, and he's the one that basically has to, because there's Fianna leaders, I suppose, watching around the coastline for any impending invasion, etc., etc. But anyway, I'm going to read the section where the men of Lady Gregory's translation is the Men of Dea, and what she means by that is the Tuatha Dé Danann. So, to cut a long story short, Taishtealach, that was one of Finn's messengers, came to the White Strand asking news, and Con bade him go back to where Finn was and tell him the way things were. But you see, Taishtealach wanted to get a little bit of a taste of battle before he did that, and he wanted to get some blood on his sword, as it were, and wanted to engage one of the enemies in a bit of a fight. So they agreed that here, I have to read this. Victory and blessing be with you, said Con Cruther. Now Con, as I said, is the one who's watching the White Strand. And go tomorrow night, he said, to the house of Bran, son of Febble, my father, at Tower Luchra, and bid him to gather all the Tuatha Dé Danann to help us, and go on tomorrow to the Fianna of Ireland. So Taisleach went on to Bran's house and told him the whole story and gave him the message. So basically what happens is that the Tuatha Dé Danann become aware of the situation first, and then the next day the Fianna are told, I have to make sure I'm reading this from the right place. Yeah. Then Bran, son of Febble, went out to gather the Tuatha Dé Danann, and he went to Dun Seshnan in Connell Gowra, where they were holding a feast at that time. And there he found 3 of the best young men of the Tuatha Dé Danann, Ilbrech the many-coloured, son of Manannán, and Nemnach the Pearly, son of Aengus Og, and Sigmal, grandson of Midir. And they made him welcome and bade him stop with them. There is a greater thing than this for you to do, men of Dee, said Bran. And he told them the whole story, and the way Con Cruther his son was. Stop with me tonight, said Sesnan, and my son Dollab will go to Bob Jarrog, son of the Dagda, and gather in the Tuatha Dé Danann to us. So here we see that the Fianna are indeed later. The stories are later than the Tuatha Dé Danann, those figures that we meet in the original stories connected with, say, Brú na Bóinne. So we're told that Ilbrech is the son of Manannán. Nemnach is the son of Aengus Og, and Aengus, of course, was the one that had taken ownership of Newgrange from his father, the Dagda. And, you know, so this obviously places it a little bit later than those original stories. Now, you know, you can make up your own mind as to, you know, I think most of this is purely fictitious, obviously. But as to whether there was an attempt made to sort of keep alive the tradition of the gods in the later stories of the heroes and the Fianna. So he stopped there, and Dollab, son of Sesnan, went to Shebian Finn above Mag Femin. And Bob Jarrog was there at the time, and Dollab gave him this message. Young man, said Bob Jarrog, we are in no way bound to help the men of Ireland out of that strait. Do not say that, said Dollab, for there is not a king's son or a prince or a leader of the Fianna of Ireland without having a wife or a mother or a foster mother or a sweetheart of the Tuatha Dé Danann. And it is good help they have given you every time you were in want of it. I give my word, said Bob Jarrog. It is right to give a good answer to so good a messenger. With that, he sent word to the Tuatha Dé Danann in every place where they were, and they gathered to him. So Bob Jarrog is immediately convinced by the message that, yeah, we do. Initially he says, no, we're not bound to help these guys, and then suddenly he wants to help. So this is the story of how they came to arrive at the White Strand. And the whole army of them came into Curia Luachra. Now, Curia is Irish for Kerry, which is the modern county of Kerry, and to red-haired Slievemish, and from that to the harbour of the White Strand. O men of Dee, said Abertach then, let a high mind and high courage rise within you now in the face of the battle. I love this. For the doings of every one of you, he said, will be told till the end of the world. And let you fulfil now the big words you have spoken in the drinking houses. So when they were full of ale, they were all full of bravado, and now they have to live up to their reputation. Rise up, Glas, son of Dremin, said Bob Jarrog then, and tell out to the king of the world that I am come to do battle. Glas went then to the king of the world. Are those the Fianna of Ireland, I see, said the king. They are not, said Glas, but another part of the men of Ireland that do not dare to be on the face of the earth, but that live in hidden houses under the earth. And it is to give warning of battle from them that I am come. Who will answer the Tuatha Dé Danann for me, said the king of the world. We will go against them, said 2 of the kings that were with him, Comer Crumken, king of the men of the Dogheads, and Cochin, king of the men of the Catheads. And they had 5 red-armed battalions with them, and they went to the shore like great red waves. Who is there to match with the king of the Dogheads for me, said Bob Jarrog. I will go against them, said Lear of She Finntraigh, though I heard there is not in the world a man with stronger hands than himself. Who will be a match for the king of the Catheads, said Bob Jarrog. I will be a match for him, said Abertach, son of Ildahach. So Lear and the king of the Dogheads attacked one another, and they made a hard fight. But after a while Lear was getting the worst of it. It is a pity the way Lear is, said Bob Jarrog. And let some of you rise up and help him, he said. Then Ilbrach, son of Manannán, went to his help. But if he did, he got a wound himself and could do nothing. Then Sigmal, grandson of Mir, went to his help, and after him the 5 sons of Finntraigh and others of the men of Dee. But they were all driven off by the king of the Dogheads. But at that time Abertach had made an end of the king of the Catheads, so 1 down, 1 to go, so to speak. And he rose on his spear and made a leap, and came down between Lear and his enemy. Leave off now, and look on at the fight, he said to Lear, and leave it to me and the foreigner. With that he took his sword in his left hand, and made a thrust with his spear in through the king's armour. And as the king was raising up his shield, he struck at him with the sword that was in his left hand, and cut off both his legs at the knees. And the king let fall his shield then, and Abertach struck off his head. And the 2 kings being dead, their people broke away and ran, but the men of Dee followed them, and made an end of them all. But if they did, they lost a good many of their own men. And of course what follows then is that the Fianna come to Fiantraigh, and there begins the various battles between members of the Fianna and the various kings and leaders, etc., who have come with Daire Donn to try and... Now, I will not spoil the story for you, I'll let you enjoy it yourself. There's another couple of interesting things. The King of Ulster's son desires to take part in the battle, and actually sneaks away without his father's knowledge to go to Fiantraigh to help the Fianna. I won't tell you how that ends. The King of Ireland, the High King of Ireland, who's at Tara, is sort of derides the whole thing, and he's actually glad that the Fianna are in difficulty. He seems to relish in the fact that they're having trouble, but his own son desires to take part in the fight. So it's very interesting that the sons of kings head to Fiantraigh to help the Fianna. And I won't at all spoil the end of the story or to tell you what happens, except for that it is quite fascinating, and as I said, maybe it belongs to the series of tales that we've come to know as the invasion myths, because that's essentially what it is. It's an attempt to land in Ireland and to put it under tribute, which is something I suppose the likes of the Fomorians tried to do as well. So I'll leave it to you to follow it up. This volume is actually a combination of Gods and Fighting Men and Cuchulainn of Muirheavna. There are 2 books in one, and this is a reprint 1994. So Gods and Fighting Men was originally published by John Murray Publishers, London, in 1904, and Cuchulainn of Muirheavna in 1902. But this is a modern reprint, and it's very good to have them all in one volume.